Coming up, a discovery of the week that is a handy hardware helper. Plus, some awesome but also slightly troubling laptop battery testing. Plus, a conversation with Avri Roth, a Powershell for Linux enthusiast. Plus, a bit of an apology from me. And whatever else comes to mind. From Studio C in Preventura, Croatia, this is Linux for Everyone, episode 51. And it starts right now.
G'day folks, this is John from regional Victoria in Australia, and you're listening to Linux for Everyone. Welcome home.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Linux for Everyone and welcome home. My name's Jason and you're listening to the podcast that kind of explores the thrilling world of desktop Linux and open source software and the people who are creating it and enjoying it. Today is no exception. Of course, we've got an interview with my friend Avri Roth, who is going to talk a little bit about his Linux origin story, but then also why he has become such an enthusiast, a fan of PowerShell, and specifically for PowerShell on Linux. But before we get to that interview and the discovery of the week and everything else, I wanted to kick this off with a bit of an apology. I always encourage you guys to help keep me on track, to keep me honest, and to call something out if you think that I have had a misstep or maybe my attitude's wrong or whatever. I'm not gonna judge you on that, and I want to ensure that I'm not kind of losing my way. And I think I briefly lost my way, and this was regarding the episode. I think it was episode 49 or 48 about shells.com. And I want to have a chat about it. This is fueled by a feedback letter I got from Kevin K. And I want to read you his email in its entirety. Okay, here we go. Kevin says, "First, I love what you do. Please keep it up. I have some feedback on the interview with shells.com. I'll preface this by saying I know you want to be respectful of your guests. However, I found the conversation felt almost like a paid advertisement. I really appreciate you had the guts to point out the laggy input latency. Most interviewers seem to gloss right over that. However, I think someone with your reach and level of respect in the community should be cautious, as the conversation almost came across as a glowing endorsement of the product. Shells.com is one of those products where the marketing and hype falls vastly short of what is actually available. Perhaps one day it'll be what they envision, but today it is not. I'm a professional software engineer and cannot fathom spending $40 a month for an 8GB of RAM quad-core processor when a snappy interface is pretty crucial to typing code all day. Laggy input is maddening. I can only imagine for someone that does video, photo, or audio editing, it's only compounded. Not to mention, 8GB of RAM and a quad-core is not a particularly beefy machine. Is it a cool idea? Sure. Does it have use cases? Maybe. But definitely not for what they're currently marketing it as. I'd be afraid someone purchases these services based on glowing reviews, only to be dismayed at the performance, and thus the reviewer loses trust of the audience. I'm sorry if this sounds harsh, but a pet peeve of mine is when those whose opinions I trust don't match what I see with my own eyes and can lead people's hard-earned dollars away from them. Trying to end on a positive note, I genuinely love your show and the passion you put into them. Following your journey has been inspirational to me, and I love that you're one of the few tech journalists who usually does ask the hard questions or point out the hard facts, such as your recent comments on Lenovo. Please keep up the great work, Kevin." Okay, so let's get into this. First of all, Kevin, I want to thank you again for not being afraid to keep it real and to keep things honest and keep me honest. With the exception of me challenging the Shells.com team about the input latency that Kevin was referring to, in retrospect, looking back on this, I feel like I did kind of just give them the platform, kind of gave them Linux for Everyone as a soapbox to kind of advertise what they do, and I didn't challenge them enough, and I didn't ask enough of the hard questions, and there's really no excuse for that. And so I think what we need to do now is do a little bit of a course correction, and let's keep them honest now. These guys have been doing the podcast and YouTuber interview circuit, and people need to know, is it really a viable service for what they're advertising, right? So I'm going to spend my own money, and I'm going to give Shells.com a proper evaluation. So if I go to Shells.com right now, in big bold print, the first thing you're going to see is transform any device into a powerful, secure virtual desktop. Whether you want to code or create on your tablet or do work on your TV, with Shells you can unlock the full performance and experience of a desktop computer on any device. Okay. Can you, though? That's a question that needs to get answered. Can you unlock the full the experience of a desktop computer? And then they have some use cases. Their use cases are: students, access your homework from any device at home or school. That's okay. Like, I have no problem. I have no issue. I have no doubt that you can do that with Shells.com. Coders, test and deploy from one device, multiple Linux distros to choose from. I don't have any coding experience, so if there is some really fast programmer or code monkey, who wants to jump in with me and help test that aspect of it, please let me know. The email address is linuxforeveryone@pm.me. I will spin up the shell for you and let you go at it, and I'll ask you what your experience is. Another use case is workers. Consolidate devices and work from anywhere with any device. And then small businesses. So, okay, those all seem feasible, right? So let's go on the navigation bar. They have a section called Why Shells. So let's look into that. Okay, scrolling down. Work on any projects from any device. Apps work how they should. Okay, access the desktop version of Microsoft Excel on your Apple iPad. Sure, okay. But when we go down to the bottom, there is a box out that says, for music producers, the full digital audio workstation in the cloud. Run professional-grade audio editing applications like FL Studio, Mix, and Audacity to produce your opus. Okay, Shells team, listen up. I'm going to legitimately try to record a podcast segment using one of these shells, and I'm also going to use something like Bitwig or FL Studio to record some basic music tracks, maybe guitar and vocals and maybe some drum loops. And I'm going to document and capture on video that experience. And I'll probably have maybe in the next episode or two, I can't promise when, but I will share my experiences with you guys on the podcast, and I will also produce a video on the YouTube and Odyssey channels. And we'll give it a proper evaluation to make things right. All right, gang? Before we move on to the discovery of the week, I just have to say it is really hot in this car. As I alluded to, I'm in Studio C. Studio A is, the home office in Zagreb, right? Studio B is this little slice of the beach that I found the other day to kick off the Summer Series on YouTube. By the way, if you're not watching Linux for Everyone videos, I would encourage you to. I'm doing my best over there, and there's some good content. And all summer, there's going to be tons of gorgeous scenery from Istria and the shorelines here, the beaches, the forest. A lot of Slayer also, if you like dogs. He's a chocolate lab, and he's hilarious. But I'm getting off track. I'm sitting in the forest, and it's like 32 degrees Celsius out there. And I think that's something like maybe 90 or 92 Fahrenheit. So it's hot. Episode 51's discovery of the week is called HW Probe. It's technically HW-Probe. And I stumbled across this tool when I was doing some research for one of my Linux myth-busting videos. I'm doing a series where I try to take these very simple, very misunderstood things about Linux and prove them wrong, basically, to get people more interested in trying it. But I was looking for some kind of graphical equivalent to what Windows has, the device manager, right? If you right-click on your start menu and scroll up to device manager, you get this visual representation of all of the various devices that make up your computer and driver information about them. And you'll see at a glance if one of them has not been detected or is not installed properly. But as part of this process recently, I installed Windows 10 fresh on my Oryx Pro, and there were a lot of those components that weren't auto-detected and were not working out of the box. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to be able to prove that those components were working with a fresh Linux install. And so there, I came across Hardware Probe, HW-Probe, which is part of the Linux hardware project. You do have to run it from the command line, but the nice thing is you only have to run it one time, and it's pretty simple, and the instructions are right there on the GitHub page. You can just copy and paste it. It takes this very detailed snapshot of your computer's hardware, and it checks the state of all the devices, and it spits out a URL, and you can view that URL and see this very, very, very detailed report. This comes in really handy if you need to troubleshoot something about your computer with an app developer or a distro developer. And another really cool use case is, let's say some of your devices don't work at all due to a missed driver. Like it's not finding a driver. A driver's not detected. It doesn't get supported in the kernel. Something like that. Then what this tool will do is it'll suggest a proper Linux kernel version according to the LKDDB, or it'll give you third-party drivers. So what I want to do really briefly is pull up my own Oryx Pro probe. That sounds really funny. And tell you one situation where this can be really beneficial. I'm looking, and it's, like I said, it's extremely detailed. Tells you your system, which right now, by the way, is Kubuntu 21.04. I'm not running pop. We might talk about that soon. The kernel, the model, the vendor, the year, the hardware ID, all of that stuff. And then you get into every component in your system. So it'll show you the bus, so maybe that's the PCI bus or the USB bus. It'll show you the ID and class, the vendor, the device, the type, graphics card, sound, network, storage, the driver, and the status. Now, the status is the most important part and the coolest part for me because you'll get a green box that says works, and then it just works. You don't have to worry about it. There will be maybe detected, but it's not active, and then detected with a note that says this device model is known to have problems. Okay, so let's click this. This is the i915 integrated graphics for Intel. It's talking about Coffee Lake H, UHD graphics 630. Detected but known to have some problems. So if I look at this, it's really cool. I can see that this device is part of the following 26 different computers. And of course, these are just results from what people have submitted. It's probably part of hundreds of computers. But you can see that the P9XXEN_EF_ED notebook laptop is failed with Manjaro 20.0.3, but with the Intraware Athena laptop under Ubuntu 18.04, it works. So that's one example of how you can start to drill down and see what maybe your issues are and how to get to the bottom of things. Anyway, I could give you tons of examples, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw my sample probe up there for you guys to look at for my actual Oryx Pro. That'll be in the show notes for this episode at Linux4everyone.com. I'll also link you to the GitHub page, which has everything you need to know. Just download there's app images, there's all kinds of different file formats. So really, no matter what distro you have, no matter what file format you prefer, you're going to be able to install and run this pretty easily, which is nice. But yeah, give it a spin. Let's add to this hardware database and let's help people out, because what's neat is, like with graphics cards, if you're having issues, you can see, okay, maybe I need to upgrade my kernel. Maybe I need to try this alternate driver. I see that it works on Arch, but not on, X distro. So it just helps you get to the bottom of things. And, but yeah, let's all just run the probe. And so they have this data. It's anonymous data. I would imagine that it improves the hardware ecosystem, and on a bigger scale. So anyway, yeah, HW probe, super, super handy. And I think it's going to be part of my my Linux toolkit from now on. So I've had the Pulse 15 from TUXEDO Computers, which is a Ryzen-based Ultrabook. I've had that for a little while. And you know what? I'm going to tell you something negative about it. Okay, I'm going to do it. I'm not going to be Mr. Positive all the time. You know what? Here's the negative part about the TUXEDO Pulse 15. It takes an entire day to run a single battery life test. It's very time consuming. Which is a subtle way of actually praising it. But yeah, I've run like 12 or 13 battery life tests, which equates to about 2 weeks worth of time. I want to talk about this a little bit because I found the results very illuminating. And there was one aspect of this that troubled me a little bit. So the Pulse 15 comes with TUXEDO OS, which at the time was basically just a slightly visually tweaked version of Ubuntu Budgie. It will, however, all of their systems will be upgrading to KDE. So now it's going to be basically Kubuntu. TUXEDO OS will be Kubuntu with some branding, visuals on top, and things like the really cool TUXEDO Control Center software. But I digress. I won't go too far into the weeds as far as sharing like every detail of every, all 13 tests that I ran. But I will tell you that the first test I did was pretty much out of the box, balanced power settings, completely default scenario with Firefox 88. And I took a specific playlist from the Linux for Everyone YouTube channel and just played all of that. It was probably like 30 hours, so there was no concern about it running out of content. I streamed that at 1080p, and I got a runtime of 10 hours and 53 minutes, which is, probably the most battery life I have ever experienced in any laptop. So a real testament to what TUXEDO is doing, and a real testament to the Ryzen hardware as well. Now, after that, I did a lot of little tweaks to try and just massage the settings and get a little bit more life away from the wall. I did stuff like limiting the CPU speed. So that's a cool thing you can do with TUXEDO Control Center. So I basically capped the CPU speed at 1.7 gigahertz. And I reduced the core count by 50%. So I pretty much disabled half of the cores. And I ended up getting 11 hours and 23 minutes. So not a huge uplift there. 25, 30 minutes of uplift. So then I went over to Pop! OS, clean install of Pop! OS 20.10. Same scenario, Wi-Fi on, Bluetooth on. Brightness at 50%, balanced, power setting. But this time I used the development branch of Microsoft's Edge browser, and I got a paltry 9 hours and 13 minutes. So, yeah, ouch. And then check this out, I ran the same exact test with Firefox 88, and I got 10 hours and 11 minutes. So, rest assured that Firefox is still better for your battery life than something like Edge. Maybe that will change someday, but as far as optimizations for Linux, Firefox still looks pretty good. So on average, I was getting between 10 and 11 and a half hours of battery life using Pop! OS and TUXEDO OS. So Ubuntu-based systems on the Ryzen laptop. And I couldn't get much more than that using what I would consider sane settings. People are going to probably have their Wi-Fi and Bluetooth on. People are not going to let their laptop just sit idle and do nothing with it. So that's not a good way of measuring battery life. They're not going to turn the brightness all the way down because we don't want to go blind. We want to actually be able to see the content. Then I did a fresh install of Windows 10 on the Pulse 15. All I did, same settings, 50% brightness, Wi-Fi on, Bluetooth on, Firefox 88, streamed the same YouTube playlist, so same exact testing environment, but with Windows 10. And I slid the slider, the battery slider, all the way down to better battery. That's all I did. I got 13 hours and 17 minutes with really no tweaking out of the box. And so I really thought, I guess I made the assumption that Linux was going to give us a lot more battery life, and I was wrong. Maybe if I had tested with something like XFCE or maybe KDE or a distro like Peppermint, maybe the results would be a little bit different, but I'm not so sure. Maybe I'll still test that and find out. But my question for you guys here is, what do you do to optimize your battery life without sacrificing the experience? I know there's stuff like Auto CPU Freak, and that is a fantastic tool that just kind of runs in the background and does a great job, to the point that some distros are starting to bundle it in by default, so it's just packaged in with the distro. I used it to basically accomplish the same thing that I was doing with TUXEDO Control Center, throttling the CPU and stuff like that. But I think it needs to go beyond that. It needs to go beyond those simple tools. So what do you guys do? Let me know. You know how to find me: Telegram, Discord, email, linuxforeveryone@pm.me, or Twitter, Linux, the number 4, everyone. Let me know. I would love to gather some of your tips and present them to the entire audience on the next episode. So definitely let me know. Appreciate you guys sharing those with me. The takeaway here, obviously, is phenomenal battery life no matter what operating system you're using on the Pulse 15, but I want to do better. Well, it looks like we're almost about a half hour into the episode, so let's switch over to my conversation with Avri Roth, who is a PowerShell enthusiast and a Linux enthusiast, and he's combining both of those worlds, and he's going to tell us why.
Hi, I'm Avri, usually known as DM for short. My Linux origin story. So I guess a lot of people start with, like the hardcore Linux stuff. But when I started with Linux, I was kind of, being chicken. I didn't want to install it on bare metal. And somewhere in the early 2000s, there was this little company that started this little application called, I think back then it was called VMware Player. And
I remember VMware Player. I didn't use it, but I'd heard about it. Sure.
Yeah, so that was kind of very early on. I found virtualization very, very interesting because it allowed. I was a tinkerer. I used to, because Windows XP and I used to run like the server versions of Windows, and I used to tweak them to have a desktop experience because it was so unstable.
Yeah.
So I was looking for an alternative, and I don't even remember where I found or what distro it was. But I started playing with all kinds of versions of Linux in VMware Player. So I tried Linux, different distributions on and off, in virtual machines until I think somewhere like 2006 is when I finally, one of the earliest versions of Ubuntu is when I really took the dive, and like I felt it stable enough, and I had enough things that I could run that I needed, and that's when I kind of took the jump, and I switched it around. So instead of running Windows with a Linux VM, I used to run Linux with a Windows VM. I still used to dual boot for games, but yeah, that's kind of where I started. I really liked the openness and like the open source things, but I was very much at the time I was very much like a GUI user.
Okay, so what changed?
I try to get into Bash and writing like Bash scripts and stuff like that, but I could do it, but it a lot of it required I felt a lot of effort, because the commands are not very how would I say, like, user friendly. Like if you look, you take a command like ls, and then there's all kinds of switches, and those switches, unless you know what they are, they don't make much sense. Like, oh, -L shows you like yeah, and you need to, and the more you use it, you get used to it. But I didn't like the fact that I had to memorize all these commands, and then like read man pages to kind of get going, and and somewhere
I completely sympathize. Yeah, I mean, I think that's why I never really got into is it Pac-Man? That stuff didn't like -SUY, and
and what any of those
update makes sense. Sudo apt upgrade makes sense.
So it makes
apt remove, apt install.
Yeah, so I slowly learned to use the command line for, as you said, like installing packages and stuff like that. But I can't say I was thrilled about it. Like it was fun, but I mean, it did the job. But I used to keep notes what everything does and stuff like that. And then I used to also run Windows servers. Windows command line was even worse. A lot of stuff like you couldn't do in command line at all, and it was very limited. So in that aspect, like Linux was much better, because you could modify config files to do to do all kinds of stuff, and write automations to do it. But at least for me, none of those things were ideal. I think the first version of PowerShell was released, I would like to say 2008, somewhere around there. And I used to work for a big insurance company in the US. So I used to be a sysadmin, but part of my job duties were to create user accounts for new sales agents. And the company used to hire like 40 of them, and then they had to pass like their test to sell insurance in different states. And I would create like 40 accounts, and every account used to take like 45 minutes. And then I would spend hours creating these accounts, and then they wouldn't pass the bar, and they would get let go. And then I would have to like take all this job that I did and throw it in the garbage. There's a saying that I really like that goes, "Those who don't automate are doomed to repeat themselves." And
that's so brilliant.
Yeah,
I love it.
I don't remember where I picked it up, but that's how it felt like. I was doing the same things over and over again. It wasn't exciting. It wasn't interesting. It was just getting the job done. Like, instead of focusing on stuff that's fun and interesting and exploring new technologies and how I can improve things, like I was buried in all that user account creation work. That's how I discovered PowerShell, really. Like so for those who don't know, PowerShell is a scripting language, and also an interactive shell similar to Bash, ZSH, Fish. PowerShell really changed my career as far as what I do. So as I said, I started as help desk, and then I was a sysadmin, and now I'm a DevOps engineer, and all I do is like deal with automations. And a lot of people that tried the Linux terminal and find it difficult to understand and remember all these commands. One of the nice things about PowerShell is that it was designed in a different era. and it was designed from the ground up to be to have like a unified and cohesive experience. So, for example, when you use Bash or use native, I would say like native Unix/Linux commands like ls or mk or cd, a lot of these, they weren't created together. They weren't created by the same team, and there's no unification, so to speak. So just because in one command -ls means one thing and another command it could mean something completely different, and unless you're experienced with it, you have no idea. The good thing about PowerShell is that every command is built from a verb and a noun. Based on the verb, and the verbs are something like get, set, invoke, remove, stuff like that. So if you have a command that starts with get, it's going to get some information and present it to you or do something with it. And if you have remove, then it starts with remove. You know that it's obviously dangerous, so to speak, like air quotes, because it's going to remove something. And all the commands are following these verb noun concept. So once you figure out these concepts, it's easier to understand what everything does. One of the things that people that are veterans to the command line, the Linux command line, don't like about PowerShell is that everything is kind of spelled out for you. So like if you have so if you have like something like get child item, which is similar to ls, like it gets you the items under something, and so you're not going to have like -l -h and you don't know what they mean. Like all the parameters are very spelled out, so if you read a command, it's easier to understand what it does.
Yeah, because it's human readable, right?
Because which is
maybe the veterans just don't like it because it's more keystrokes.
Also, another nice thing is that PowerShell started its life as a Windows-only shell, and then a few years ago, Microsoft open sourced it and brought it to Linux and Mac, and there's even like creative ways to run it on Android that are not officially supported by any means.
What I'm curious about is if you can give us some real world examples of PowerShell in your life, maybe. I know that you've done, and I'm kind of leading you into this because I know you've done some really cool stuff. You've done some really cool stuff for Linux for Everyone, for example. But it seems like every time I talk to you, you're suggesting this cool solution for an issue that I'm having, or just an idea that you've had to make something better, and it's using PowerShell. So
I personally changed the default shell on all my Linux installs to PowerShell. So when I open the terminal, what usually you get is Bash, or it's the default unless you change it. So for me, when I open the terminal, I get PowerShell. And the reason I do this is because I find things to be a lot easier. So for example, if I have to search a string or a keyword in like thousands of text files, I find it's like a single one-liner in PowerShell. A lot of little things that I want to do are easier to do with PowerShell. I can give you an example, like a fun story, so to speak, about how we acquired the linuxforeveryone.com domain name. So, you used to talk about the podcast. It's like, oh, the domain is Linux, and you would spell like the number 4, all kinds of stuff. And I was like, I wonder if the number 4everyone.com is available. So so Linux has a command that's a tool you can install. It's called whois, and then you could type like whois and then the name of the domain, and it will go to the registrar information and give you like the information of the domain. And so I did that, and then I saw, it's like expiring soon. So then I wrote like a little PowerShell script. That's also another thing about PowerShell. You can run native Linux commands and use them in PowerShell. So I wrote like a 3-liner script that would go get the whois information, check the expiration date, and based on the date, if the date is and the status, if it's expired or if it's about to expire, it would send me like notification. and then I created an auto, and it's also very easy in PowerShell to write something that sends you an email. So that's what I did. Like I did it. So
okay.
one night, like I don't know, like I get a message like, oh, the domain is expired and nobody renewed it. I put a few informations like, oh, if it's expired or if it's expired and you can buy it, send me an email. So then I did that, and then I ran to my computer and I was like, oh, like, you know, GoDaddy or whatever registrar and like I used, and then I saw, oh, it's available for buy, so I just bought it right away. And then that's when I reached out to you and I was like, oh, look, I have this domain and we can use it and blah blah, and it took us 2 years to transfer it to you, but that's a different story. But like it wasn't difficult. It wasn't like some long script, or like I didn't have to use all kinds of like awk and sed and grep and all kinds of difficult things because that's another cool thing about PowerShell, is that PowerShell is an object based language. Because of that, it's easier to work with certain things. Like if you have a date, it's easier to increment the date because it's a date object, so you can do cool things like add days or remove days or months or whatever. It's easier to convert things. Like one time I built for one of the podcasts, I built a tool that converts the on-air release day, like on-air dates, and convert to my time zone. Like also like one liner, convert the time zone and send me like a message or something like that. So like for a lot of things, I find that once you learn the basics, it's really powerful and you can do a lot with it. And the nice thing also is now that it's cross-platform, I can use the same commands or the same things that I write to work on Windows, to work on Linux, to work on Mac. I have a little script that I can share. You can put in the show notes. It gets the information of the system of the Linux system you run. It knows like if it's Ubuntu, if it's Fedora, if it's CentOS, if it's like I can even figure out like the versions of Ubuntu very easily. And then I can run, oh, if it's Ubuntu and it's Ubuntu like 2004, then install these packages. And if it's 1804, then install these packages. So like
you can do something similar to that with Ansible, right?
You can, but Ansible is more if you want to have like a defined state of your machine, and you want Ansible to manage that state. But here it's just, like I have a setup script that's not dependent on anything, and I can just run it and it will install whatever packages that I tell it. I can also do, it can do anything. It also let's say if Ubuntu, if you want to modify files, or you want to create like a certain folder structure based on whatever OS you want, or it's very easy to in PowerShell to know if the system is Linux. You can also, by the way, create one script that can configure your Windows machine or your Linux machine or your Mac machine based, on whatever you want it to do.
So theoretically, and everybody out there, keep in mind that I am not a programmer of any kind, so I'm probably going to sound really stupid right now.
It's all right.
I'm probably going to sound very stupid, but
nobody starts as a programmer. It's like acquired knowledge, It's like cooking.
So let's imagine that I have this PowerShell script hosted on GitHub somewhere, and I get in a new system from TUXEDO computers that I'm going to review, right? And I want to do some benchmarking, and I want to have a set package of software, right? So for Onyx Test Suite and Steam and whatever. So if I'm hosting this script on GitHub, could I technically just have this fresh install of Ubuntu or Pop! OS or Arch or whatever, open up a terminal, and what do you do? Curl? Is it curl to download, or wget or wget command?
You can. You
download
can
that script and then just have it execute.
Yeah, you can do that. You can also obviously make a script that installs PowerShell and then runs it.
Question is
and then runs it. You can also do that. You can also obviously make the script get like install the Phoronix test suite and then run the test, and obviously the rabbit hole is very deep, right? So how much you want to do.
I mean, like if I could completely, that would be the dream for me, is if I could completely automate at least the benchmarking side of evaluating hardware. You know, for example, okay, I have a brand new installation of Pop! OS, and I've got this script that will download PowerShell and install it, and then install Phoronix Test Suite, and not only install Phoronix Test Suite, but install specific benchmark tests.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you should
in Phoronix Test Suite, and then run them all. That's the dream.
And even you could definitely do that. And I'm sure you can even, because it's very easy to send an email, so you can like even have it send an email to you when it's done, stuff like that.
God,
like
that's brilliant.
There's also modules that extend the language and give it all kinds of abilities. For example, there's a module that creates like a little command line interface and allows you to like pick information based on the input. You can create one command and pipe it to this command line interface and then do something based on what you choose. So for example, I have like a one-liner that download like a podcast downloader PowerShell script. So I can give it like the RSS feed of a podcast, like Linux for Everyone, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And then it will go to the RSS feed, get all the episode titles, and then pipes it to this like GUI command line interface, like cursive. And then I can pick whatever episodes I want, and then I press enter, and then it pipes it to YouTube DL, and it just downloads like all the episodes.
No, I was just gonna say, like, can't you do that with a podcast app?
You can, but you can. But you know what's better than an open source app is something you wrote yourself. And by the way, don't think I'm like some insane programmer. I'm a very good scripter, and obviously I have like systems engineer knowledge to do all kinds of system engineer related stuff. But I wouldn't be able to write like a program like a podcast app, for example. That's not my expertise. So I know how systems work. I know a lot of stuff like that. And I acquired scripting knowledge so I can bridge the gap of the things that I want to do automatically without actually knowing how to write a program to do that. There's also like other modules that are really cool. For example, PowerShell is really good at converting different types of information to different forms. So for example, if somebody sends you like a CSV file of, email addresses for a newsletter or something, and you want to take it and put it in another app that, it doesn't know how to read CSV files. It only knows how to read JSON files. So it's very easy, like one command to run in PowerShell to convert from CSV to JSON, or to convert between JSON and CSV, or all kinds of different data types. So sometimes, you want to export from one program and it gives you it only in this one form, and you want to import it in another, and that other program only accepts this other form. So PowerShell is really good for me, or for people that figure out how to use it, to convert between these data types.
I think sounds like the sky is the limit, so to speak, right? I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like if you can imagine something that you need done and the solution doesn't exist, you can probably script out that solution.
Yeah, it's not supposed to, like, I wouldn't build like a full-blown, app in it. But the way I like to think of it is like the glue between things. There's this very expensive enterprise system, and that system generates alerts. But in the user interface, there's no way to remove multiple alerts. So you have to like click one at a time and clear them. And one time there was an issue, and we had thousands of alerts. And we talked to like the developers of this app. No, there's no way to clear these alerts. So I told the guy, like, what do I need to do? Like, I have to sit here for 3 hours clearing alerts? And he's
Oh
like,
my
yeah,
God.
that's how our program works. There's nothing you can do. All right, fine. So there's a PowerShell module called Selenium. By the way, for Honest Test Suite and a bunch of other testing software,
Wait a
use
minute.
Selenium.
Yeah, I've used Selenium just to benchmark various browser
Yeah,
routines and speeds. Yeah.
yeah. So for those who don't know, Selenium is pretty much like a wrapper for browsers to be able, so for you to be able to control browsers using like a mechanism, like automatically to control a browser. So, for example, for Honest Test Suite uses it to test the browser. I used the Selenium module. By the way, I ported the Selenium PowerShell module to Mac OS and Linux because I wanted it to be there. And then what I did is I created something that finds these buttons in the page and marks and clicks and then selects mark as read and repeats itself how many times I needed. It was automation, but not. It allowed me to automate something that I like that maybe I could do with native Selenium, but in using driving Selenium via PowerShell was much easier because it's something that I'm more familiar with and know how to operate. And it wasn't very difficult to find these elements. And it was really funny because the support guy called me the other day and he's like, "Hey, how did you clear all these alerts? Probably took you a long time." And I was like, "No, I wrote this, 10-line script. It finds them and clears them for me." And he's like, "Oh, that's so awesome." You could probably do the same things in Python or in Bash, but I find the PowerShell is easier to figure, like it's easier to understand and learn how to do all these things.
I'm trying to think about my workflow, specifically my audio and video production workflow, and I'm going, wow, I wonder how much of that can I automate?
So the first thing is that I find, regardless of whatever scripting language or programming language you pick, the easiest thing to do is to write some sort of pseudocode. Like, try to figure out in layman's terms what's, like, if I had to do this task, what do I have to do? Get this file from here to here, convert it from this format to this format, put tags on the file, for example, all this kind of stuff. And then once you've broken it down, you didn't write a single line of code. You just wrote the ideas or the step-by-step process that you have to do in order to do it. Then you could start working on like the Bash script or the Python script or the PowerShell script to do it. Also, sometimes when you start, you don't know how to do everything, but sometimes like you can do step A. By the way, that's how I started when I created the user accounts. Creating the accounts used to be something that I used to do a lot of copy paste of first name, last name, etc. So at the beginning, I only figured out how to automate the account creation. And as I moved on, I automated more and more things. And eventually I had what used to take me like 30 minutes per account used to take me 3 minutes by pressing enter and waiting. The more you use it, the more you learn, the more you're exposed to technologies that are used in the and you get better and better. A lot of people say, "Oh, I use this and it, like, I started learning PowerShell and it really changed my career." There's also a lot of companies that build PowerShell modules for different things, so you don't have to learn how to manage this specific thing. For example, there's a community module for FreeNAS, right? So you don't have to. So once you know PowerShell, you don't need to know as much FreeNAS and ZFS. Obviously, you need to have some ideas of certain things, but you don't need to know like how to do everything. You can use the PowerShell to do the things for you. You just say set this or create this new ZFS volume and give it a size and stuff like that as parameters to the PowerShell command, and it will do this thing in the back end. But you didn't have to learn as much in like as in the back end technology, so to speak. So it really helps you to experiment and learn and get exposure to things that you thought you could never do, and then you figure out how to do them and it blows your mind like, oh, this is amazing. And you also have a sense of accomplishment when you wrote a single line that downloads podcasts. You feel like, oh man, this is so cool, I made this.
Do you have samples of your PowerShell scripts out there?
I do on my GitHub. I need to obviously do more of that. I also have a Telegram group for specifically the reason I created. Well, it started as a Telegram group. Now it's a Telegram group, a metric server, and I think a Discord that I created not too long ago, and it all bridged together. But the groups, they're all called PowerShell on Linux, and the reason I created them is for I think two reasons. One, I felt there's not enough information or communities for people that like PowerShell and also like Linux and want to have like a place to combine them. Obviously, if you use PowerShell on a Mac and you come and you ask questions, everybody is super friendly. They'll help you out. We had people come in and try to convert Bash scripts. They don't understand what they do to PowerShell or vice versa. And even we have people that have Windows related questions, and we try to help them. But the focus is PowerShell on Linux. Another reason I created this, and we could probably this is a whole other topic, is the hostility that exists in our community and the Linux community today for technologies that are tainted because they come from, because they were flagged, or there are people that specifically don't like them. PowerShell is a good example because it's created by Microsoft, despite the fact that it's open source now. Like, you could see that a lot with Snaps or
yeah,
System
you do see a lot of that hostility with a lot. I think with any, the larger a corporation gets, the more hostility they attract. And so it sounds like you started this to kind of combat that a little bit, right?
Yeah. So every time I was, in podcast and I would say something cool, or I would I figured this out, people, I would get a lot of hostility. I left multiple Telegram groups because I felt specifically targeted because I was using this technology that I find exciting, and I'm not trying to force it on anyone. I find it fun. I find it empowering, and I want to share it. And I'm not trying to convert anyone. I'm just trying to show that there's another option. And I created the group to try to mitigate that, to have a safe place for people that find these things exciting.
Good for you. Good for you. I really, that's I've always tried to foster that same attitude in all the Linux for Everyone groups. Openness and be welcoming and be understanding and be open-minded, and no gatekeeping, no toxicity. Get that out of here. We all love technology. That's what we all have in common. But, people have got to understand that it's not a religion. It's not.
Yeah,
and it's okay if I want to have my Windows 10 installation just for firing up Call of Duty.
Yeah, exactly.
Let people use the tools that they need to use, and they will find Linux more appealing and more attractive and more exciting if your attitude is awesome about Linux.
Exactly. A lot of people forget that behind every person of Telegram or Discord or whatever community, behind every user that you see on the screen, there's a person. It doesn't matter what distro you use, what shell you use, what programs you use, by showing people the cool things, but also respecting them. If they say, this is not for me, I want to use Windows, I want to use Mac, you actually show them the openness and freedom that this technology offers. And if they're interested, they're going to go and try it out. Like, you come and you ask, hey, I want to try this Linux thing, which distro should I use? And everybody's like shaming you for picking one or the other. Or, if you install Discord in a Snap or a Flatpak or an app, what do you, it's somebody else's computer. You can offer them like, hey, I do this, like, or I find this fun, but shaming them for picking one or the other, that's just going to make them run away instead of experiencing this awesome thing that, that we all share and love. And
I want to share two things on that note. Somebody brought this post to my attention today. It's on Reddit.
I saw it, yeah.
Specifically, the Linux subreddit.
Mm-hmm.
And the title of the post is, I'm still downloading my first Linux distro, and I've already been distro shamed, and the conversation turned political. Is this normal? Like, this poor person.
Yeah.
Is, it's self-explanatory, right? It's the title. This shouldn't happen. I also want to point out one of the comments in that thread.
Mm-hmm.
The comment says, no, that's not normal. But imagine a room full of people. All of them are completely normal, except one dude in the corner who thinks the earth is flat and that the English royals are all space lizards. Anyone who's in there will remember the noisy psycho who kept screaming sheeple at the top of his voice and think, I will never go back to that room again. And they're not going to remember the hundreds of just random people. So ignore the dude in the corner who had, quote, opinions, and just do your thing. Also remember that the person probably will never have any good ideas anyway, so if they say something that sounds like a fact, chalk it up to absolutely garbage. Now, okay, that's still a kind of a hostile attitude, but the summary of that is 1% of the people make up 99% of the noise.
Yeah.
I'm not excusing it, and I'm not saying that makes it okay. And it's a real shame that somebody had that much hostility and toxicity as they're like literally still downloading their first Linux distro. But I do think to an extent that kind of attitude exists in every community.
I think we as a community need to aspire to get rid of those 1%, so we can actually have new people come in and experience this wonderful thing. And instead of fighting over which distro, telling this person which distro should you use, how about tell this person, here, there's a bunch of distros. Here you can, this is how you install a VM. Try them all. Figure out what you love. What's fun for you? Maybe you like, hey, one of my first distro, funny enough, was, I think, Ubuntu Satanic Remix, because I love metal. And I loved all the, they used to. I would close windows and this fire effect, and the wallpapers were awesome. And I think I even have a screenshot. I can try to find it of that, what that distro looked like, and the everything was cool about it. And maybe somebody would come and like, oh, this looks terrible. Like, why would you use this? But for me, it was like. It was one of the things I loved about Linux. It's like, oh man, there's this distro for metalheads. Bring it on, it was so amazing. I think we have an obligation to give people the tools, not tell them to use A or B or C. Give them the tools to figure out for themselves what is awesome, what they love. Every person is individual. The same thing is, you're not going to tell somebody, hey, listen to this kind of music, because everybody listened to something else. This should be the same mentality. Give them the tools to listen to whatever they love and try it out. And they'll figure out for themselves, what what they should use.
Like if you're an experienced Linux user and someone comes up to you and asks, "Hey, what distro should I use? I want to get into Linux. What distro should I try?" Answer that question with a question.
Yeah.
Don't just say, "Oh, Pop OS." Ask them, like, is it for a gaming laptop? Are you using AMD or NVIDIA? What are your needs? Like, is it for work? Is it for play? Like, are you familiar with this? Ask them questions so that you can, give them a more personalized answer. And then maybe they're less likely to get frustrated on their first try.
And at the end, you should also say, this is what I recommend, not what you should use. And if they don't take your option, also be respectful for that. Everybody is their own person. And that, that's what I try to do with PowerShell. I try to show that, I find it cool. It's not for everyone. Some people will love it. Some people will hate it. I also try to not bring politics into this. Like that, there shouldn't be there shouldn't be any politics involved in what you install your computer.
So if people want to get their feet wet with PowerShell, whether that's on Linux, Mac, or Windows, what do you recommend? Where can they start?
You can install it via Snap. I know that a Flatpak is being worked on, but it's not official yet. You can go to the PowerShell GitHub account, and there's links for a bunch of distributions, like deb packages, RPMs, etc. You can just download the file and install it. People have questions, they can always come to the PowerShell on Linux Telegram group. There's also a Twitter account, Posh, the number 4 Linux. And ask away. There's no dumb questions. Feel free to.
But if I know nothing about it, but I've listened to you talk about how amazing and flexible and cool it is. Where do I learn it though? Not just asking questions and installing it, but where do I go to learn it?
There's a lot of information online. There's a few commands in PowerShells. There's once you install PowerShell and you launch it, then there's the get help command, and then you can type whatever command after that. Microsoft released, I can try to find it and we can put it in the show notes. They have I think a getting started, which is fairly new.
Perfect. Okay.
I need to, figure out and get my stuff together to start really make videos to get people, familiar how to install the cool stuff you could do. I think it's something I plan to do. It's just really hard to find the time to do it. But I'll definitely, work on that so people can see it. Obviously, I can talk about it, but when you see something, it really changes your opinion.
Well, you and I are planning to do a collaboration of sorts on YouTube. And you've got some ideas and some demos that you want to show people.
I'm looking forward to it.
Well, dude, it's been a lot of fun.
It's my pleasure. The linuxforeveryone.com domain, it was just the beginning. I really want to help foster this community of respect and a place for people to come and find this awesome thing we all love. And yeah, I'm here.
You know what? I think you have earned yourself a forum sub topic or subfolder, or however you like. When and by the time this episode launches, the new site could be live. I'm not actually sure.
Hopefully.
But the idea for the new site is to have all the Linux for Everyone content under one roof, and a lot of community content as well. And we're looking at having either a discourse forum or a Flarum forum. And maybe we can have like a dedicated, PowerShell for Linux section there. That'd be kind of cool.
That'd be awesome.
Well, I'm going to let you go, but not really, because we're going to go do a video now. Thanks again, man. All right, my friends, that's going to do it for episode 51 of Linux for Everyone. Thank you so much for listening. And if you like this show, tell a friend. If everybody told one friend, we could basically double the audience. So that seems like an easy thing to do. So let's do it. Before I say goodbye, though, I want to do two things really quickly. Number one, a quick update on the brand new website. Nassif has pretty much finished the design. And I spun up a WordPress instance on Linode last night. And so we're going to start putting, we're in the final stretch now. And I'm really hoping to have the site launched within the next week or two for you guys. Number two, it is time to thank all of the Linux for Everyone superfans, past and present. I haven't done this in a little while. I do it on every video. There's kind of their own, they have their own in-credits sequence, which is really neat. But I want to thank all of the people who are supporting the show with their wallet or who have supported it at the $5 tier or more in the past. If you guys want to do the same, you will have my gratitude, of course, and you'll also get some goodies, some exclusives. For example, there is the CarCast, which is an exclusive kind of mini podcast where I just talk about some things that are happening in life and some behind-the-scenes Linux for Everyone stuff, and play you one of my favorite songs, hopefully a song that you've never heard before, so you can discover some new great, mostly rock-based bands and artists. I also occasionally release completely unedited interviews as well as early episodes of the podcast and videos before they hit the public. So let's do this. If you guys want to tune out now, that's fine. There's nothing after this, but these guys and girls deserve a big round of applause. James D, Casey K, Skeeter Murphy, George L, Tanhouse, The Linux Experiment, Bearded Giant Games, Alex S, Carlos C, David Thompson, Ricardo Mariel, Jeff M, Blue Jackson, Eric Nance, Nathan Heath, Chance, Mark LeBrock, Ricardo M, Joe Paris, Julian D, Cassidy, James Blade, Simon Butterworth, Musical Coder, Dark One LTG, Grayson Petty, Luke Jensen, Sarah, Kurt G, Hogosha, Restless Nomad, Sammy Manila, Chewy Dorman, Infi, Justin, Slimbook, Joe Hill, Sean Winham, Jackie Moore, Nitai, founder of Help Monk, Blake, Dave Lee, Wit, Pseudo-Wiz, Jay from Virginia, James Donaldson, CT Hood, Eric Paul, Tyler Brown, Electron Frost, Andreas Bender, Zebedee Boss, Sean Davis, Haplo, Linux Paul M, Marcus, Leoman, Stephen Cross, Brad W, Jeff W, Lango R, Andreas G, Samuel R, Peter K, Joseph D, Carl S, Mitchell Valentino, Simon Moss, Stephen K, Spencer P, Taylor R, Burak Y, Kevin M, and Dustin W. Woo! Wow. I'm going to go for a dip. It's time for a swim in the sea. Thank you so much for listening, everybody. This has been episode 51. We'll see you next time. Until then, take care, and take care of each other. Bye.